Live from New York City, it's the Gary Null Show. And now, your host, Gary Null.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Null, broadcasting and video streaming live from our studios in New York City. I'd like to welcome you all. We're going to talk about how safe is the fish that you're consuming if you eat fish. I'll give you the latest report on that. Also, everyday chemicals that we're all exposed to are linked to chronic disease, especially in men, a new study from the University of Adelaide. And then anti-Alzheimer compounds found in plants, University of Toyama in Japan, and the University of Zurich. Generous people live happier lives, and a lot more on health and healing. Then today I'll present the latest information on what's wrong with Wi-Fi and cell phones and all those electromagnetic pulses that we're surrounded with. I'm going to have a guest in the second part of our program today, and I'm going to give it extra time because there's going to be something really new and exciting, especially for the up to 5 million Americans suffering from chronic fatigue syndrome. We have Hillary Johnson. She's an award-winning investigative journalist writing on medical issues, and she's going to talk about what it is. We have been on the wrong track. She's got good new information for us, so I'm looking forward to sharing this to help all the people in this audience. She's published in Mirabella, Life, New York Times, Rolling Stone, Working Woman, Discovery, so she has a lot to share. Also today, for those of you who still consume milk, I've got a little 3-minute video clip for you. Now, not everyone can watch what we do unless you go to YouTube. When I say that we're video streaming, what it means is that we're recording the show in real time, but that doesn't mean you can watch it in real time. It means that we then post it on YouTube so more people, millions of people, can be exposed to it, where it would be limited to just those who are watching on Facebook, which is substantially less. For example, we had almost 6 million people download documentaries we did up on YouTube. So it's a way to reach a lot of people with important information. Also, I broadcast Monday to Friday, noon to 1 Eastern Standard Time, Tuesday from 7 to 8 p.m. And not always can you watch or listen. Sometimes you're working, might get home at night. Well, you can download the program on the archives. In fact, you can load with one phone call up to 5 programs. Let me give that number so you never have to miss a program. That number is 701-719-9976. Again, 701-719-9976. But let's say that you're out and about, anywhere in America or Canada, and you want to listen over a phone or any portable listening device. Let me give that number to listen to live. 712-775-6850. 712-775-6850, because some of the stations that you're used to hearing it on might preempt us because of special programming or fundraising, but we're on everyday live, so you never have to miss a program if you go to those numbers. Now, I'm going to begin our program today by giving you the latest on fish. A lot of people say they're vegetarian. They've given up pork and beef and chicken, but they still eat fish. The only healthy fish to eat would be sardines. There are certain nucleic acids which are very powerful in anti-aging quality, and wild salmon. So if you choose to eat fish, those would be the two. You never want to eat a grouper. It's a bottom feeder. Catfish, it's a bottom feeder. And just remember, clams and filter all those toxins that are in the water in which they're grown right into their bodies. When you eat them, you're eating something that's very toxic. That's also true for all your crustaceans, meaning they have a crusty shell on the outside like lobsters and shrimp and oysters. So what happens when you go into a restaurant and you say, I want something healthy, I'll eat salmon. Normally it'll say North Atlantic salmon or Scottish salmon or Norwegian salmon, they're all farm raised, which means that they're kept in very confined areas. They're very toxic. There's no room for them to swim at all. Thousands upon thousands are in an area half the size of a football field. And of course, an enormous amount of waste builds up. They're under stress. But there's something else to be concerned about. If you think because it's nice and pink, that's a coloring agent they add into the feed. But also this is from Mercy for Animals, Julia Capialio. It says fish farming is so filthy that salmon are getting lice. Yes, quote, last year wholesale salmon prices rose by 50% due to an outbreak of sea lice from Sweden to Norway and Chile. That's according to The Guardian. A sea louse, or a common salmon louse, is a parasite that feeds on the blood, the skin, and the slime of salmon. Sea lice killed thousands of tons of farm fish just last year and caused skin lesions and secondary infections to millions more fish. Now, the parasite infests nearly half of Scotland's salmon farms. In fact, sea lice are more prevalent in farm salmon, and the confined spaces of factory farms are perfect breeding grounds for it. So what happens when you go to buy a piece of salmon? Well, if it's defective, you wouldn't buy it. In fact, there's 3 ways of knowing whether or not the fish you're buying is fresh or not. 1, it's if you put your thumb on the skin and it stays indented. 2, that if you see that there's not a clear eye, but rather it's foggy. And 3, the smell, which means it's decaying, it's decomposing. But what happens when you buy canned salmon? How do you know that it was inspected so that if there was lesions or cancer, that they would throw it away instead of canning it? After all, it's not something you can see. You're getting pieces of it. So my best advice at this time is there's no need for fish at all in your diet. All the amino acids that are ever required for total health you can get from a plant-based diet. It's out of print now, but it would be worth your while to try to find a copy of The Egg Project. You might find it in a library. And if so, it's a study that I conducted at the Institute of Applied Biology many years ago that showed that all plants, from the beans and legumes and starchy vegetables, they all contain all 8 essential amino acids in different combinations. And therefore, by having a meal, most macrobiotic restaurants is called a simple platter, where they'll give you some sea vegetables like a seaweed and some rice or some grain like quinoa or rice. They'll give you some starchy vegetables and some greens like collard greens and kale and beans. Now that's a perfect combination of blending together all those wonderful amino acids till you actually get more usable protein at a higher value than you would if you had meat or fish or chicken. In fact, it's even better than the egg. So there is no legitimate medical or nutritional or dietetic reason to have anything that has a heartbeat or face in your diet. Now, you may want it, and that's your choice, but you don't need it. So that's important to know. Also, generous people live happier lives. This is from the University of Zurich, and here's what it says. Generous people make people happier, even if they are if they're only a little generous. People who act solely out of self-interest are less happy. Selfish people. Merely promising to be more generous is enough to trigger a change in our brains that makes us happier. This is what neuroeconomics found in a recent study. And what some have been aware of for a long time, others find hard to believe. Those who are concerned about the well-being of their fellow human beings are happier than those who focus only on their own advancement. Doing something nice for another person gives many people a pleasant feeling that behavioral economists call a warm glow. In collaboration with international researchers from the Department of Economics, University of Zurich, they investigated this and found that it actually changes the brain in a person that gives something. And give you an example. Over on the Upper West Side, there are a lot of churches, and some go to the extent of, in the morning, giving out whatever food that they can or have available that they've gotten from restaurants and stores to those who are homeless. And I walked by there today on my way to work, and I work in mid-Manhattan now, no longer on the Upper West Side where I was for, 25, 27 years. But a nice location, and there's plenty of people who need help. And I stop and talk with the people. What do you do? How long have you been unemployed? Where are you sleeping? What's it like? What adjustments do you have to make? How generous are people? And one of the people gave me an interesting story, that he's an artist, has been, and after the relationship that he was in broke up, that other person in the relationship had really been supporting them. So he was able to do his artwork, but it was not commercially viable, but it was aesthetically pleasing, that ability to create. And then he found himself, for the first time, really thinking, wow, I didn't appreciate how much the other person was doing for me. They were going out to work every day, and I was benefiting from it. And so I asked him, did you ever take other people's generosity to you for granted? He said, absolutely I did. But now I appreciate it because I realize what happens when people are not generous. And I said, what brings you to this neighborhood? And he said, well, I'm not from here, this neighborhood, but I find that the people on the Upper West Side tend to be very generous. When people walk down the street and no one, he says, look around you. No one's asking for anything here. They're just waiting patiently to see what food we might get. It might be a sandwich, it might be some soup, but we appreciate that. And every single person here, you'll hear him saying thank you to the people in the church. But if you're on the street, and he said every day without fail when people are walking up this street, he said someone stops and gives $1, gives $5, and a smile. And I said, how do you think that makes a person feel when they've looked at a person who is in need, reached in their pocket? Now, they can't feed everyone, but they're doing something. Makes them feel good. Makes them feel that they're connecting with another human being at a level that maybe in their normal work and family and business they wouldn't. And it just made me think, and that's why I wanted to share this little story with you today, that we all have gifts. We're not all equal. I'll never be able to play basketball like LeBron James or Jim Curry, but maybe they won't be able to give a 5-hour lecture spontaneously and improvisational as I would. And someone else has the gift of music. Everyone has a gift. No one is born without the capacity to have a gift. It's mastering that gift, finding that gift, opening yourself up and deconditioning yourself to what you were told should be your gift, and going to that level through solitude, through introspection, and saying, what is my gift? Why was I put on this planet? And those people who find that place and then continue that journey, they're always happiest, no matter what other circumstances are occurring in their life. But if we have a gift, I believe we have a moral and spiritual responsibility to share it, to give it away. Whether someone says thanks or not is not the issue. It is knowing that you have made your life aligned, harmonize with your spiritual self by being generous, where you didn't have to be. And giving through charities is not the same. I believe that you should go out and look someone in the eyes, listen to their story, and then let them know you care about them. Maybe they need toiletries, so take them to a drugstore and get them to, everybody needs something on the street, and we got a lot of people on the street. And by the way, we've got 10 times more people on the street than what official statistics are. So, and you're going to feel better about life also. You just feel good when you're doing good. So something to think about. Now, for those of you who know someone with Alzheimer's, here is new research, and I always like to get to the cutting edge stuff. This is from University of Tuana in Japan, quote, researchers have identified active compounds in Drynaria, that's Drynaria, rhizome, Rhizome, which improves memory and reduces Alzheimer's characteristics. Now, this is a medicinal plant, and it's long been valued for its role in treating numerous diseases, but they found the actual molecules within the plant, and they published an article in Frontiers in Pharmacology talking about this. So, once again, in nature, we found what is called a functional food, meaning there is a function in the body to it. For example, if I ask you to take blueberries, it's a functional food. Blueberries are loaded with very important polyphenols that can protect your brain, turn off inflammation in your brain, help slow down all brain diseases, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's, and it's in the scientific literature. Whereas if you took vitamin C, the single most important nutrient in all of nature, there's at least 50 different things that it can do. It depends upon the amount and how you take it. Generally, it's best to take it in a protein shake because then you won't be getting hyperacidic reaction from your stomach. You see, your stomach has a low pH, around 2.2, and that's a lot of hydrochloric acid. So when you take in ascorbic acid hits hydrochloric acid, and frequently you get reaction, bloating, gas, distension. Sometimes if you take too much, you'll get diarrhea. But if you take that same amount of vitamin C in a buffered form, chelated form, and you put it into a smoothie, just a banana smoothie, then it's easier to get through your digestion. You get more of it. You can take it more often during the day. And a lot of people, especially older people, don't like to take vitamins. So this is one way that you get them to take them. You say, what's your favorite taste? Well, I like chocolate. Okay. So you put some raw cacao chocolate into a blender. You throw in maybe some rice milk, coconut milk, non-dairy, and then you put in your vitamin C. Maybe you put in alpha-lipoic acid, even some garlic or onion capsules. So whatever you want them to have, it's all and blend it up. And the predominant taste is not the sulfur from alpha-lipoic acid or the sulfuryl group, which they would not like, but they would like it because you have a dominant flavor enhancer and disguiser. And by the way, chocolate is the major disguiser of bad taste. So anytime I want to give someone something that's good for them, though they don't like the taste, I disguise it in chocolate. So it's just something to pass on. And also, everyday chemicals linked to chronic disease in men. This is from the University of Adelaide. Quote, chemicals found in everyday plastics are linked to cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure in men. Researchers from the South Australian Health and Medical Research Institute and University of Adelaide investigated the independent association between chronic disease, the one I just mentioned, among men, and taking these concentrates. This was published in Environmental Research. Now, what am I talking about? I'm talking about food packaging. You know, let's say you buy something that's wrapped up, all right? The wrapper, that let's say if you're eating something that was hot, the wrapper is going to leach, because the heat is going to leach chemicals into the food that you're consuming. That's not good. When I was growing up, our mothers would make baked potatoes by greasing up a potato with butter and then putting it in aluminum foil and sticking it in the oven. They didn't know that aluminum foil, when you add heat to it, it leaches that, or even something with acidic background like a tomato. If you were making a tomato sauce and you put it into a plastic container, the tomato's acidity causes the plastic container chemicals to leach into that. And when you drink from a soft bottle, let's say in even water, and that's what we were giving all of our GIs over in Iraq and Kuwait back in 1991 until this day. They're sitting out in the sun. And by the way, one of the hottest places on earth yesterday was 126 degrees. You can't stay out in that weather for more than about 10 minutes before you could risk a heat stroke. And nothing can grow in that. And that's why seeds are dying all over the place. Even in Montana today, which is one of the hardiest soils for growing hard wheat, what's called northern wheat, versus Texas, they can grow a different type of wheat, different type of rice. It's so hot that it's burned half the wheat crop out. Now, this wasn't in any newspaper. Every day in the morning at 4 o'clock when I get up, I look at a special website that tells me all about the weather events, how many hurricanes, tornadoes, temperature, the coldest temperature in Antarctica yesterday, minus 110 degrees, the hottest temperature, rain on the Antarctic shelf, which is very dangerous. The breaking off, as I told you, in fact, this was the radio station, the radio program that told you before anyone else in the media that the Larsen B shelf was going to break, and the mainstream media said it would be 100 years. It broke 2 weeks later. And I told you the Larsen C shelf, which is a backstop to the glaciers, which are at a very high angle going into the water. That meant now it broke, it's gone. That means that all that trillions of tons of ice and snow that were being held back. Here's the glacier, let's just say a 30-degree angle, and here's that buffering ice shelf now is gone. That's going to start calving into the water. So now we're going to see, even though the Larsen C shelf was at the southwest corner of Antarctica, on a relatively thin peninsula, still a huge amount of ice that's going to go in the water. And once that starts, it can start a whole cascading of other ice sheets. So we're going to get water coming, and it's not going to be predictable. It'll be in large quantities, and it'll be in a relatively short period of time. So anyhow, I like to know what's going on in the world. The mainstream media is not going to cover it. When I told my friends in California, it's time to look for another sustainable and nice environment. You've enjoyed California for all that it offers. Good. But you're going to have an earthquake out there. It's past due. There's already rumblings. You're going to have more forest fires and worse forest fires than you've ever had in the state's history. That's happening now, as it is in 17 states. But you wouldn't know it, because now it's just normal to have the worst fires in Arizona history in the last 3 days, and they're growing. And it's getting too dry, and so more things are drying out. So if something can't grow, and then you got the little Colorado that supplies over 40 million people in the Southwest, including Los Angeles, with their water, and if the Colorado, because of global warming and because of all the municipalities using the water along the way, and because of trade deals with Arizona and other countries to other counties and states to use their water, in the next 5 years, you're going to have severe drought in Los Angeles and everything below that, because you don't have your own natural aquifers. It has to come through the Great Canal, the Sierra Madres, and where it might have a lot of snow one year, it might go 5 years with no snowpack. You're simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. So my suggestion is start looking for other places. But in any case, going back to Kuwait and Iraq and Afghanistan, where we have soldiers, they're getting all this water. That water sitting out in the heat in plastic bottles. Those plastic bottles are leaching the chemicals from the plastic into the water. That means that they're hydrating, and about 72% of your total body is water. They're getting all these chemicals, and that's playing havoc with their kidneys, their liver, their brain, and their heart. So if you're going to drink it out of glass. And 99.6% of 1,500 Australian men selected at random tested positive in their urine samples for these chemicals. So it's almost 100% because of how many chemicals we use in our life. I also wanted now to give you a little information on these new 5G cell towers and smart meters that are increasing the microwave radiation and invading privacy. This research, which is really good, and I commend John P. Thomas of Health Impact News for creating this. Here's what he says, quote, When the Federal Communication Commission approved the use of 5G microwave communication technology in 2016 and approved the use of microwave frequencies in the 30 gigahertz range, they opened the door to even higher levels of human illness and severe disability for American children and adults. Microwave radiation, such as that currently being used in cell phones, Wi-Fi routers, and smart meters, has already been linked to numerous health effects. The introduction of even more intense levels of microwave exposure at higher frequencies will push many people into life-threatening chronic illness. High-frequency microwave radiation is often overlooked as a causative factor in illness because most conventional healthcare providers, government regulators, and telecom companies and electric utilities believe microwave radiation used in communication technology is harmless. It is not. Despite the warnings being raised by scientists, well-informed healthcare providers and grassroots organizations about existing and future microwave hazards, telecom companies are planning to implant 5G technology throughout every urban area in America. They are already testing this new generation wireless, which is very toxic, in Boston, Austin, Palo Alto, and Mountain View, California. And so, in fact, in California, get this, so for the people living in California, quote, proposed legislation in California would permit telecom companies to erect 50,000 new microwave antennas in residential and commercial areas without municipal approval. The G5 microwave antennas would be placed on top of existing utility poles or on public infrastructure such as schools, libraries, or bus shelters, and public parks. And then it goes into the dangers: the ringing in the ears, dizziness, disturbed sleep at night, sleepiness during the daytime, moodiness, irritability, unsociability, feelings of fear, anxiety, nervous tension, mental depression, memory impairment, pain in muscles, pain in the region of the heart, breathing difficulties. That's just to name some. Inflammation caused by excessive histamine in the blood, oxidative stress, autoimmune responses, reduced blood flow to the region of the thalamus, pathologic leakage of the blood-brain barrier, and a deficit in melatonin metabolic availability have been observed. In fact, there's evidence that existing and new frequencies of microwave radiation are associated with cancer, heart disease, neurological dysfunction, immune system suppression, cataracts in the eyes, and sperm malformation. This is a 6-page report, and also AT&T is making it its way to get, 50% of homes are wireless, but they want to get 100%. They also want to get it to where they'll allow more of it, and even if you don't want it on your home, if they get their way, you won't have any choice. If you want AT&T, if you want a telephone or phone service, you'll have to allow them to put these microwave antennas on your home. Just a heads up of how tough it is. Now, I was going to give my report on what to do so that we can actually implement universal health care. So no American, because of existing conditions or finances, will have to pay a penny towards any medical procedure. I'm not talking about cosmetic surgery, ones that you actually need and require. And I've broken it down into a complete report. It's fully vetted, it's accurate, but I will not have time today, but I will do it at the beginning of tomorrow's program. And I'll show you how without it being an impact upon our federal deficit, that we can save over almost $2 trillion a year over our current medical industrial complex budget, have better health care, better quality of medical input, more time spent with our primary care physician, preventative health care facilities. Now, none of what I'm going to say has been discussed in any of the Democratic Republican forums. Everything that you're hearing is based upon what the pharmaceutical industry, the insurance industry, the private and profitable hospital associations, and their lobbyists have been able to write and implement as law. Well, this they have nothing to do with. So Universal health care, how can we do it? What would it include? That'll be tomorrow. We're going to go to our guest in about 8 minutes from now. We're going to take a break, however, right now and come right back, so please stay with us. Nice to have you with us, everyone. We're going to talk in a few moments about chronic fatigue syndrome. My guest will be Hillary Johnson, who is one of the most knowledgeable people in the United States about chronic fatigue, how it's been misdiagnosed, what's the real cause or causes, and what are the most appropriate treatments. And so this is new and vital information you'll be hearing. But before then, we're just going to take a few moments to help our sister station, WBAI, where I've been going now 41 years, longest running daily non-commercial radio program in the United States. They're going through a rough time. Today they are outside of the Empire State Building, the City Hall, and then the Empire State Building. Somewhere they're having a press conference, and they've been promoting it heavily, and I hope they have a good turnout. They are trying to get the Empire State Building, where our antenna is, to renegotiate with them. They owe about $2.2 million now, a total of $4 million by the time they finish up their lease, and they simply don't have that money. Actually, they do have that money. They have far enough money. They have about $10 million in real estate, and that simply, as I asked the executive director of Pacifica, why don't you just get a mortgage and pay off all the debt? And they said, well, can't, because it's not the Empire State Building, but Democracy Now! And Amy Goodman are owed somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 million and not willing to forgive the debt. And as long as we have that debt, we won't get any loan. So my suggestion is a good group of people who are friendly with Amy Goodman, go to her and suggest that for the survival of Pacifica and her so-called beloved BAI, why doesn't she simply forgive that debt, which she's capable of doing? She's very wealthy and has made about $72 million since she privatized Democracy Now! That would be a good gesture, kind of rebalance some of that karma. And that would take away the largest debt that we have, and then hopefully, because of politicians suggesting that give us a break, it would be a very easy break for the Empire State Building to do, to forgive the $2 million or make some adjustment for its payment, and then BAI could go over to another very inexpensive, market-valued, which is about $12,000 a year transmitter, which does exist, but we can't get out of one lease. So that said, that I hope they do well. But in the interim, everyone's forgetting something very basic. All the people who supported the station, and we're grateful for that, they need to get their premiums, because at the end of the day, you lose audience if you don't, which is one of the major reasons. Set aside the politics, set aside the alienation, all the other possible reasons that we've lost management, being out of touch. If you just keep asking people to give you money and you don't give them something in return that they're promised, they're not going to stay around forever, even the hardcore ones. So we've been doing all we can to get the premiums to people. I personally paid for out of my own pocket, my own efforts, thousands. But we got to get another system that actually works better. I have a system, and the system is simple. As people make a donation, you have two bank accounts. Immediately, the amount of a premium goes into one bank account. The rest goes into a general fund to pay all the other necessary expenses. And that way, that money immediately goes into buying the premiums for any one show on the air and pick, pack, and shipping it out. That way, we have a quick system of getting the person's donation, processing it, and then, if it's a credit card, and then sending their premium, as any other system does in a reasonable period of time. Hopefully, they will take that advice. But in the interim, what I'm doing, I was asked by Tony Bates to raise some funds to help with this last fund drive to get these premiums out, because not one single premium, at least from my program, I can't speak for any others, has been sent out yet. Yet the next drive is starting, I believe, next week. And I can't, in good ethics, I cannot ask people for money if those premiums haven't been paid for and gotten out. So hopefully we will raise some money, enough to buy some premiums, and then send them out. That's our goal. To do that, we had a couple options. I could do a lecture. Last time I had raised about $30,000. I could do a premiere. That raised about $35,000. But that takes too much time. They would have planned it much in advance. Couldn't do that till August or September, which they are planning. And I'm happy to donate my time and films to do that. But the one thing we can do is we can ask people who want to change their life for the better, who want to de-stress, detox, who want to look at their body differently and say, how did I get high blood pressure, cholesterol elevated, overweight, diabetes, prediabetes? How to get all this pain? And what can I do to live a healthier life by making better choices? That's what you learn in a retreat. Because in a retreat for 1 week or 2 weeks, you're in a very beautiful but a healthy environment where every one of the staff is selected because of their capacity to share positive energy. The food, the juices, you could drink 15 glasses of juice a day. Major cleansing, de-stressing, spending quality time with introspection in nature. Wonderful, beautiful gardens that you can sit in. Rose gardens with 30 different types of roses in one garden, with wonderful aromatic plants, jasmine and lilac and lavender. You can commune with nature. You can do water aerobics in a saltwater pool. You can take mineral baths. You can get so many wonderful lessons, art classes. And I've seen what people who didn't think they had any artistic skill at the end had gorgeous, creative pieces of art that they had drawn or painted, because we have outstanding professional artists there on staff who help. Cooking classes, raw food gourmet presentation. Our chef is a gourmet chef, and he is a vegan, so everything is vegan. And so it's just a wonderful environment. Nothing else like it. In fact, on the line right now, because I want to go to our guest in the next minute or two, we have Luann Panesi. And Luann has someone who had been at a retreat. And Luann, could you introduce who's on the line with you, please?
Absolutely. I brought on a registered nurse. Her name is Barbara Duggan. She's attended more than one retreat, and I think that she could give your audience a wonderful perspective about the magic that happens. People have often said, I stepped out of the van and onto the property, and it was just a magical experience. So, Barbara, if you wanted to share with us some of your views.
Of course. I'm Luann. Hi, Gary. As anyone who has ever gone on a vacation or looked for a home or an apartment, you know that a neighborhood has energy. And Gary has picked out in his place an amazingly peaceful, beautiful area. And then he has amplified it by what he has put in it. There have been so many times that I've been able to just go off peacefully and to meditate. And within that, there's a healing and an energy that it's hard to describe. It opens you up to understanding yourself, to a healing power within you that you may not have even realized was there. There's also animals there, and animals in and of themselves have an amazing energy to give and a love to give. There are swans, there are lakes. It's something that in my own life I have never experienced before, and I'm so glad that I have the opportunity to go back.
I only have about 60 seconds, Barbara, but I'm going to ask you for some short answers. How long have you been a nurse?
I've been a nurse for over 40 years.
40 years. Okay.
Yes.
Coming to these retreats, have you seen things that could not be explained within the medical paradigm that you've been a part of for 40 years?
Absolutely.
Have you seen Orthodox physicians there who've seen things happen that they have never seen and stated they've never seen in their medical practice, but were real because they were there and they actually examined people who came with something and left with nothing?
Yes.
What was the most remarkable situation that you observed that no one had an answer for?
The most remarkable one was a woman with end-stage COPD, which is emphysema, who came in with oxygen, and she gradually, through the healing of the place, through the healing of the foods, and through the assistance of the staff, she was ending up, by the second and third day, she was doing walks initially down the driveway, and then she was out walking on the road, and she was not using her oxygen. And her comment was, at the end of the week, I'm going home, my husband is not going to know who I am. She so significantly improved.
In her last day there, when I asked people, would you like to share your experience? Now, she came, she was on oxygen, she was bent over, she was diabetic, she had high blood pressure, she was sitting in a wheelchair, and she couldn't do more than move her feet. On the last day, did she start to laugh and laugh for 5 straight minutes? And I mean, huge laughs.
Yes.
And didn't try if you have end-stage emphysema, because she had been a 50-year smoker. Try laughing. You can't even talk, and she laughed for 5 straight minutes. Do you remember that?
I do. She was standing, she was laughing, she was talking, and she was without oxygen. Her color was good, her energy was good. It was a miracle. On
the last day, did she walk 3 miles unaided?
She did. Mm-hmm. She did, and she was very proud of that fact. Very proud and amazed. She
should have been, because in every person there is the desire to be optimally healthy. We just have to liberate that in the right people, the right place, the right food, the right energy. You can liberate and have a wonderful experience. Barbara, you've seen a lot. You've seen a lot of people change if they choose to. You've seen the power of positive energy. You've seen the power of positive energy exchange. So I want to thank you. Are you coming in October?
Yes, I am, for 2 weeks, Gary.
Good. We'll look forward to seeing you. Thank you, Barbara. So if you'd like to join me, I'll be there every day and helping people in their journey of health and healing in one of the most remarkable, tranquil, peaceful places where we ask people to stay silent and introspective and journal about their lives. You're guided in this journey. Tasty food, delicious gourmet food. Give Luann a call. Her number is 903-881-7008. Again, 903-881-7008. And this is a special fundraiser for WBAI, our sister station in New York. That money will be used to help purchase premiums and get them right out the door for you. Thank you, Luann, and thank you, Barbara. I'm Gary Null. Our guest is on the line now. Let us go over and say hello to Hillary Johnson. How are you today, Hillary?
I'm very good, Gary. Thank you very much. I wanted to just note or request, if before we get too deep into our conversation, I wanted to let people know that if they want more information on this topic later on, we're going to be updating my website with a new database of content that we'll release this month, and until then people can go to the website. It's oslersweb.com, oslersweb.com, to read a lot of great information, as well as leave their email to be alerted when we launch our update.
Good. And Hillary is the author of Osler's Web, Inside the Labyrinth of Chronic Fatigue Syndrome. Now, Hillary, chronic fatigue syndrome appeared on the scene as a notable condition approximately at the same time as the outbreak of AIDS in the early and mid-1980s. And there were some major outbreaks, such as in Florida, which led health officials to designate it as an epidemic. And there's a lot of controversy over this health condition, and we use the term chronic fatigue very loosely, more as a symptom that might have multiple causes, such as overstressed lifestyles. And it's been associated with a symptom of Lyme's disease, and it's been regarded as an autoimmune disease in its own right. Yet rarely do we hear it called by its official name, and which is abbreviated for ME, encephalomyelitis. And before I have you go into ME, as an infectious disease with a likely microbiotic or microbial cause, please first give us some history about the condition's appearance and public health. What are the most common symptoms, and what is the extreme life-threatening condition that we're dealing with? The forum is yours.
Well, thanks, Gary. You're absolutely correct. This disease did emerge concurrently with AIDS, which is a very, very interesting phenomenon that has not yet really had its day. It needs to be looked at, particularly since there's so many similarities between the two diseases. When you talk about ME, that stands for myalgic encephalomyelitis. Now, this was the original name of the disease back in the late 50s. It was observed on occasion in very small outbreaks around the world, but it was really a minor, it was a disease that was sort of explored by just a handful of clinicians who were interested in it. It was not a common disease remotely. But again, as you say, yes, it became quite common by the middle 1980s. It was clear there was an epidemic going on, and some of the symptoms of this disease, it's been really, unfortunately, disguised by the name chronic fatigue syndrome, which was a name ginned up, shall we say, by the Centers for Disease Control in 1988. This name, what they did was sort of medicalize the condition of fatigue, and essentially, they really created sort of this highly distorted funhouse mirror version of reality that's been foisted on the public for decades about the nature of this illness. In terms of symptoms, it's really impossible to overstate how severe this disease is. And really, almost every system in the body appears to be damaged and simply not working. That includes the central nervous system. The brain damage that occurs includes loss of white brain matter, abnormally low blood flow to the brain. These are symptoms seen in heart failure, I might add. And cardiac disease is another hallmark of ME. There's also pathologically low blood pressure, inability to stand without fainting, profound weakness in the legs that prevent walking. All of this is really highly typical of the disease. I think there's, the research that's been undertaken, there's really a lot of it. There are probably 9,000 papers in the medical literature about this disease that have been published since the 80s. But as I say, most of the research is descriptive. It's been simply documenting biological abnormalities, of which there are literally hundreds, but it's been like a series of Russian dolls. You discover one abnormality, and a world of other problems announces itself. It's kind of like falling through the looking glass. In addition to the cardiac and central nervous system problems I mentioned, there are cellular abnormalities, metabolic disturbances that are just remarkably severe, to the point that it's been described as a state of hibernation, wherein the metabolism shuts down in order to simply survive, much like a mammal hibernating to survive a harsh winter. So if patients try to defy this medical reality or are forced to defy it by people urging the patient to get out of bed and exercise, their life is literally at risk. That's an answer to your question about symptoms. I'm sorry if it was too long.
No, that's fine. Very early, there was a hunt for a viral candidate. and as the cause. And it's interesting that Robert Gallo, the HIV researcher at the National Cancer Institute, who has been such a controversial figure in the AIDS debate, also had a role in trying to find a virus as the cause. What are the different viruses, particularly retroviruses, that have been candidates as the cause? And how strong do you feel the evidence is for this condition, or chronic fatigue, being an infectious illness?
Those are great questions, Gary. Yes, Robert Gallo's lab, it wasn't Gallo himself, but a couple of scientists in his lab in 1985 discovered what they ultimately decided was a new human herpes virus called HHV6. And what they found initially was that HHV6 was in, about 80% of patients with let's call it ME, and in just a very small percentage of healthy people. Over the years, that ratio has changed, and HHV6 is now being found in most people, and the Centers for Disease Control contends that HHV6 is actually a common herpes virus. But that was a very, very interesting, era, because it was the first time that a discrete pathogen was found in this disease and not in large numbers of healthy people. But as HHV6 sort of receded, and I might say it's having a bit of a comeback these days, but as it receded in the late 80s as a candidate virus for this disease, a scientist at the Wistar Institute in Philadelphia discovered fragments of retroviral genes in patients. Now, retroviruses, of course, are in the family of viruses that include HIV. And because ME is so much like AIDS in many ways, in terms of the immune abnormalities and so on, the idea that it might be a retrovirally caused disease was very attractive to a lot of scientists. Unfortunately, this disease is, as you probably may know, it's been steeped in politics for really since its origins. And the CDC did not make much of an effort to try to replicate this discovery made by the Wistar scientist. And eventually, they just sort of dropped it and said that they couldn't replicate it, even though they didn't really try very hard. So that, but then in 2009, there was a great drought for about 20 years where very little research was done into potential causes. But in 2009, another scientist working out west at a research institute in Nevada discovered a second retrovirus in patients, very small percentage in the regular population, the healthy population. So in patients, though, it was almost 80% again, the same percentage as the number of patients who'd been found to be infected with the virus that was discovered in 1990. But again, now this was published in Science magazine, which of course is a very prominent, prestigious magazine where major discoveries are unveiled. HIV was published in Science when it was discovered. But ultimately, 2 or 3 years later, Science retracted the study that named a retrovirus as the cause of chronic fatigue syndrome, or ME, because it was discovered that the virus XMRV, as it was called, was probably a lab contaminant However, the scientists who made this discovery, actually it's plural, there were several, they still contend that there is significant immunological evidence to suggest that a retrovirus is at the heart of this disease. But again, with the retraction of the paper in Science, scientific investigation in that direction ended. And so now we're back to studies of abnormalities.
Hillary, with all the research you've done on chronic fatigue syndrome, and you've done as much as anyone else I know of in the United States, Charles Ortlieb has done a lot, especially on the human herpes 6 virus and its connection to immune dysregulation. What would you say is the primary cause or causes from your perspective of chronic fatigue syndrome?
To be honest, I can't tell you. I don't think that's known yet. I will say that I don't, a lot of people are sort of, a lot of people in the scientific community who are interested in this disease are sort of pushing the notion that there can be multiple causes that ultimately end in the establishment of ME in a patient. I would only, on that issue, I think it's just simply wrong, and I think, certainly I'm not a scientist, I'm a journalist, and I'm just going on what the scientists I trust and have interviewed believe, but I don't think it's multiple causes. I think there's ultimately going to be found a single pathogen that is probably driving this disease. Most scientists I talk to who are specialists in this disease, they agree. They will, and usually will say that. They say it in a kind of sotto voce manner because it seems to be the third rail of contention in this disease. People don't really want to believe that there could be another tuberculosis out there, or another AIDS, or another Ebola. In other words, another serious infectious disease with one cause. But I think ultimately this disease probably won't be solved until that particular agent is found. And I think that there's good, there's a lot of support to indicate that it could be a retroviral cause, but I think that Chuck Ortlieb's belief that this is that HHV6 somehow is the causative agent. I think there's legitimacy for that as well. Unfortunately, there's not been enough research dollars directed at this disease to really find out.
Well, if there was a drug that could treat it, there'd be research dollars. You know how it works. Hillary Johnson, thank you for being on, and she is the author of Osler's Web. Her website is oslersweb.com, and she will keep us all up to date on the latest discoveries because it's a major condition and it affects a lot of people. Thank you very much for being with us.
Gary, thank you.
Just a program announcement for tomorrow. Tomorrow, keeping you ahead of the curve and well-informed on global warming and what will be the consequences of this break-off of the Larsen C shelf, the largest iceberg in history, the size of Delaware. I'm having on the program Professor Eric Rignot, Chancellor Professor of Earth Sciences at the University of California, Irvine. He has also won the Nobel Prize, and he is considered the world specialist on ice sheet modeling, and particularly in Antarctica, and ice-ocean interreactions and climate change. So the best person in the world to talk about the consequences will be on tomorrow. Also tomorrow, we'll be having Joanne and James Moriarty, who are going to tell us the truth about what was Libya like prior to the United States, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and the neocons in Washington, the military-industrial complex, just saying we need to destroy the country. And they'll tell us the truth. They're non-political. They're not liberal or conservative. They're simply people who lived there, knew the public, and knew the truth of what went on, and yet no one in the media has ever interviewed them on this. We will. So we're going to set a lot of time aside tomorrow for these two discussions. So I want to thank you all for listening today. I look forward to sharing more tomorrow. Have a nice day, everyone.